In this world, people gain unique abilities by eating the fruit of the skill tree. These abilities range from becoming a powerful firebender to a legendary sword saint. However, for Light, his skill was far less impressive. He became a nutting master. The day of the skill ceremony was one of excitement and hope. Light and his childhood friend, Lena, walked together to the church, eagerly discussing their potential skills. Light had always dreamed of being an adventurer, so any combat-oriented skill would do. Lena, on the other hand, didn't care what skill she received, as long as she could stay by Light's side. Despite her nervousness, Light reassured her that they would both gain incredible skills. At the church, the Holy Sister explained the rules of the skill fruits. Eating a fruit would grant a skill tied to a specific profession, ensuring a secure job without the burden of student loans. However, there was a strict, immutable rule. No one could eat more than one skill fruit. Consuming a second would result in certain death, a warning cemented by the tales of countless victims who had ignored it. Lena was the first to choose. As she bit into her fruit, her body radiated a blinding light, and the Holy Sister gasped. Lena had acquired the legendary Sword Saint skill. It was a once-in-a-decade occurrence, and Lena's destiny as a top-tier adventurer was sealed. Light cheered for his friend, overjoyed by her success, before stepping up to claim his own skill. Nervously, he took a bite of his chosen fruit, but instead of gaining an awe-inspiring combat ability, he was blessed, or cursed, with the nutting master skill. The Holy Sister tried to console him, but the truth was clear. His ability was limited to farming nuts. Devastated, Light begged to try another fruit, but the fatal consequences were non-negotiable. Lena, ever supportive, promised to stay in the village and help Light grow nuts. However, the Holy Sister had other plans. Lena's talent as a sword saint was too precious to squander, and the sister insisted she leave for the royal capital immediately to begin her training. Torn but unable to refuse, Lena left, promising Light she would return for him one day. 3 months passed. Light had embraced his role as a farmer, using his skill to grow and sell high-quality nuts. Though his profits were modest, he tried to stay positive. However, the pain of Lena's absence lingered, and news of her rapid rise to S-rank adventurer only deepened his sense of inadequacy. Despite his skill's limitations, Light trained tirelessly, hoping to awaken a hidden talent. Day after day, he practiced with a sword, striking at a tree stump in vain. Exhausted and disheartened, he questioned whether Lena still remembered him, or if her new life had erased their bond. One evening, his young ward, Aya, interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Orphaned and abandoned by the village chief, Aya had been taken in by Light, and the two had since formed a makeshift family. She invited him inside for dinner, proudly serving a stew she had made. Light praised her efforts, but as he ate, Aya casually mentioned using the special fruits he had stored in boxes marked with skull symbols. Panic set in. Those fruits were skill fruits, and consuming more than one was supposed to be fatal. Light braced himself for the end, his body racked with heat and pain. Yet, as moments passed, he realized he wasn't dying. Instead, a surge of power coursed through him, accompanied by the emergence of a second skill, Swordga. Aya, too, began experiencing changes. She had unknowingly acquired an appraisal skill from the stew, and could now read Light's abilities. To their astonishment, his nutting master skill granted immunity to nut-based toxins, allowing him to survive the second fruit. The sword god skill dramatically boosted his attack power and magic resistance when wielding a sword, making him far more powerful than he'd ever dreamed. Eager to test his newfound strength, Light raced to the forest. With a single swing of his sword, he effortlessly cleaved the tree stump and the massive tree behind it in two. Overwhelmed with excitement, he decided it was time to pursue his dream of becoming an adventurer. The next day, Light ventured to the guild, determined to prove his worth. For the first time in his life, he felt that his dreams were within reach. Armed with his newfound skills and an unwavering determination, Light prepared to carve a new path for himself, one that would reunite him with Lena and allow him to stand beside her as an equal. Light had always dreamed of becoming an adventurer, and today might be his chance. After gaining his newfound powers, he visited the Adventurers Guild to officially begin his journey. Turning to Aya, he said, "Stay here on this bench while I grab us a quest," and headed to the front desk. As Light stepped away, Aya, brimming with curiosity, used her newly acquired appraisal skill to scan the other adventurers in the guild. She was amazed by the wide variety of skills people had, from elemental magic to combat mastery, but she also found some skills shockingly useless, like one man who had a self-damaging ability. Just then, a commotion broke out near the front desk. Looking over, Aya saw Light in the middle of an argument with another adventurer. The man at the center of the dispute recognized Light as the nut seller from the market and mocked him, claiming that someone like Light didn't belong in the guild. But Light ignored the taunts entirely and calmly turned to Aya, saying, "Let's go." The man, offended by being ignored, lashed out and attacked Light with his sword. However, thanks to his sword god skill, Light's reflexes were far superior, and he effortlessly blocked the strike. Shocked, the man stumbled back, realizing that Light wasn't the easy target he'd assumed. Seeing that Light wasn't someone to mess with, the man's friends quickly intervened, convincing him to drop the matter. Claiming he hadn't been serious about the attack, the man and his group stormed off to their first mission. Shortly afterward, Light and Aya left the guild, their first quest in hand. Their mission took them to the rocky plains, where Light couldn't contain his excitement. "Stay close to me," he told Aya. Soon they spotted their target, a slime monster gliding across the distance. Light approached cautiously, trying to sneak up on it, but the slime noticed him right away. Forced to abandon stealth, Light charged forward, slicing the slime in half with a single swing. The ground cracked beneath his blade, a testament to his overwhelming strength. Aya cheered for Light's first successful quest, but they still had work to do. To complete the task, they needed to carve up the slime's remains and return the parts to the guild for payment. Aya hesitated, feeling bad about cutting up the creature, but Light reminded her that the reward would be enough to buy pizza. With her moral qualms vanishing at the thought of pizza, Aya eagerly helped dissect the slime. Their task was interrupted by a distant shout. Rushing toward the sound, they found Jean, the adventurer who had mocked Light earlier, and his party under attack by a massive ogre. The group had picked an easy slime quest but had run into this far deadlier creature by mistake. The ogre swung its massive club, forcing the group to dodge. They were clearly outmatched. Jean, spotting Light, quickly came up with a plan. He and his friends ran straight toward him, hoping to use Light as bait to escape. Realizing their intention, Light saw figures, he muttered. With the ogre now focused on him, Light had no choice but to fight. As the ogre swung its club, Light dodged, but Aya reminded him that his sword god skill didn't boost his defense. One mistake could be fatal. Undeterred, Light resolved to push himself. If I want to be the world's greatest adventurer, I have to overcome this, he thought. Channeling his newfound strength, Light leapt into the air, dodging another attack, and slashed the ogre's club in half. The creature roared in frustration, but Light was undeterred. In one swift motion, he brought his blade down, cleaving the ogre in two. Jean and his friends, watching from a nearby hill, were left speechless. Later, back at the guild, Light handed over the slime parts and the ogre horn as proof of his success. The receptionist was skeptical at first, but Jean's friends backed Light's story, confirming that he had defeated the ogre single-handed. The receptionist, now impressed, prepared his reward. As Light waited, Jean and his friends thanked him for saving their lives. Albeit somewhat begrudgingly, the guild's atmosphere suddenly shifted as a crowd gathered near the entrance. Jean explained that the S-rank party had just returned, and among them was Lena, Light's childhood friend, and the person he'd been striving to catch up to. This was the first time he had seen her in 3 months. Excited, Light approached Lena, calling out to her. But to his shock, she looked at him with cold eyes and said, "I've never met this man before in my life." And thus, episode 1 concluded.
Takumi is unexpectedly summoned to another world, finding himself standing before the goddess Nolan. However, the first thing she does is apologize sincerely, explaining that it was all a huge mistake. When the summoning spell is cast, it randomly selects individuals from Earth to become heroes in the new world. Takumi's life had been going well, and he was never meant to be summoned, but an error during the spell dragged him here along with the others. The mistake is blamed on the Holy Sidonia Empire, who recklessly activated the forbidden summoning spell. Because of this, Takumi was not sent to Sidonia like the other heroes, but instead to Nolan. Takumi asks Nolan if she can send him back to Earth, given that he was brought here by mistake. Unfortunately, Nolan explains that she cannot. Out of frustration over Sidonia's actions, Nolan had erased the summoning spell from the world's magic laws, making it impossible for anyone to move between worlds anymore. Worse yet, Takumi's original body had perished in the process, leaving him as a disembodied spirit. Panicking at the realization that he's a ghost, Takumi is reassured by Nolan that she has a plan. While she can't send him back, she can give him a new body and allow him to become a citizen of this world. As an apology, Nolan also offers him her blessing to make his new life easier. Takumi, with little choice, agrees to be reborn in this world, which pleases Nolan. She then instructs him to open his status screen to review his new life. Takumi is surprised to find that Nolan has given him a 17-year-old body, even though he's actually 40 years old. Nolan brushes off his concerns about the minor details and urges him to choose a job class. Takumi, not wanting to fight, opts for a production-based job rather than a combat class. Nolan then implants the job into his soul, along with several other beneficial blessings. She sends him on his way, forgetting to provide him with any tutorials. Takumi crashes into a forest upon his rebirth, and after picking himself up, checks his reflection in a nearby river. He's now a completely different person, with no memory of his old body. Inside the bag Nolan left for him, Takumi finds food rations and money, ensuring that he won't starve. His status screen reveals that Nolan has equipped him with many useful skills, including elemental magic. Curious, Takumi tests out his new powers by forming a water ball in his hand. He quickly learns that all the elements work in the same way, and he can control them with ease. Now that he understands his magic, Takumi decides to head to the nearest village. On his way, Takumi stumbles across a stick lying in the path. Using his appraisal skill, he identifies it as Trent wood, a material useful for crafting magic staves and spears. Deciding to try out his crafting abilities, he uses his skills to make a spear. He then spends the next hour gathering useful plants nearby, filling his item box with the plants when he realizes they won't fit in his bag. Suddenly, a young girl runs toward him, calling for help. She explains that a monster is chasing her, and Takumi soon sees a massive horned rabbit charging toward them. In a panic, Takumi attempts to defend himself, but in an accidental twist of fate, he ends up stabbing the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. Surprised by his victory, Takumi realizes it was due to luck, not skill. As a result of the encounter, Takumi gains the job title of warrior, a class he didn't want. After ensuring the girl Molly is unharmed, Takumi learns she was out gathering herbs where she wandered too far from the village. Takumi, feeling it would be wasteful to leave it behind, stashes the rabbit in his item box. Realizing too late that he revealed his ability, he decides there's no turning back. As they approach the village, the other summoned heroes are arriving at Sidonia, confused and disoriented. They are introduced to Empress Elizabeth, who tells them they have been summoned to save the world. However, one of the heroes, Akana, feels instinctively that Elizabeth cannot be trusted, as her gut tells her the Empress is deceptive. Meanwhile, Takumi and Molly arrive at the village where her parents, Banga and Martha, express gratitude for Takumi's help. Takumi asks if he can stay in the village for a while, as he has nowhere else to go. The couple welcomes him but explains that there is no inn in the village. However, they suggest building him a house, and soon all the villagers gather to start construction. Takumi uses his earth magic to flatten the ground, but using such a large-scale spell drains his mana. The villagers are amazed at his power, and the next morning his house is completed thanks to his skills in carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing. Takumi then decides to practice alchemy using ores he gathered to extract metal. He successfully turns iron ore into usable material but finds that the process consumes a lot of mana, leading him to nearly pass out. He's saved by Martha and Banga, who give him a recovery potion. Despite their warnings, Takumi continues to experiment with his alchemy skills, eventually making useful tools and weapons. Later, Takumi asks Banga for some basic potions to use as templates for his own creations. After making his own potions with herbs he collected, he compares them to Banga's potions. Takumi's version appears more magical, but unsure of its effects, he tests it by building poison tolerance, consuming the potion until he nearly dies, then healing himself. One day, Takumi encounters a massive boar and a poison spider. The boar charges at him, and despite his attempts to defend himself with magic and a spear, nothing works. Just as he's about to be overrun, the spider intervenes, attacking the boar. Takumi, seeing the opportunity, uses alchemy to break down the boar's head, defeating it. The spider is injured, but Takumi heals it, and it ends up becoming his pet, which he names Maple. Returning to the village, Takumi shows off the giant boar and his new pet spider. The villagers are amazed, especially by the fact that he managed to tame such a dangerous creature. Takumi suggests they share the boar meat since it's too much for him to eat alone, and a feast is held in his honor. Banga brings him the valuable leftovers, which can be sold for money in the nearest city, Bolton. Takumi decides that his next destination will be Bolton. All the while, Goddess Nolan watches Takumi's progress with satisfaction. She is pleased with how well he is adapting to this new world. One of her fellow goddesses asks her what she hopes to achieve with her special treatment of Takumi, but Nolan claims she's just doing what feels right, without any specific goal in mind. As the episode ends, it seems that Takumi's journey in this new world is just beginning.
Our new anime begins with our protagonist, An. Standing at the edge of a cliff, tired of the world and overwhelmed by despair, he decides to end his life, believing he is the weakest in existence. As he takes the fateful leap, we rewind to the past to understand how he arrived at this moment. An was once part of a party of two individuals, Zoid, a magician, and Jolene, a swordsman. Together, they descended into a dungeon to hunt monsters and earn money. The trio successfully defeated a giant